Well, Pat, we're back for yet another episode of Talkin Thrones, Season 6, Episode 6, Blood of My Blood. This is doing another weird thing that last season did, where it's kind of splitting up a majority of the storylines between two episodes. We do not get a lot of major primary storylines in this episode, but what we get, surprisingly better than I remember. I don't know. What's your thoughts before we get started?
Hey, listen, Dom, I think you and the Talkin TV family that's Talkin Thrones with us will agree that this is the subplots of my plots episode, right? We're going to get a lot of side characters, and we're going to see, how things develop for going forward.
100%. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin Thrones. You know, Pat, it's so interesting kind of this point where we're at in our Game of Thrones run. Like I said, we're into this officially. It's crazy. We're starting the second half of Season 6 right now. We're that much closer to Battle of the Bastards, and with that much closer to the end of our run. And it's so interesting because we've been talking about so many of these episodes now, and I feel like we're at a point where the episode structure, as far as like where the season is going to go and like what point it's going to be at, because we've just been so familiar with the 10-episode sequencing of which they've done for the last 5 seasons now, that it's almost hard to believe that an episode at this point in the show's run can surprise you. And like I said, like we both teased at the beginning of this episode, this was an episode that was subplots the episode. There is no kind of major plot arcs. We get no North in this episode in any way. We don't get any of Meera, thank God. We don't get any of the Iron Islands. You know, we get a brief check-in with Bran north of the wall, but for the most part, this is handling kind of, and the next couple episodes, you're going to see them start to handle like a majority of the ancillary storylines. You know, we get King's Landing, we get Bran, we get Arya. We get King's Landing, we get Sam, we get Arya, and we get brief check-ins with Bran and Daenerys at the beginning and the end of the episode. So you can imagine my surprise. So not only is this episode like pretty good, this episode's actually pretty friggin' great. I don't know. What were your thoughts about this episode?
Well, to be honest with you, we actually, are recording this podcast like a little bit later than usual. So I watched the episode getting prepared for when we were going to sit down and talk about this episode. A day has passed. Now we're recording this. And to be honest with you, I almost forgot everything. So I'll be, looking at the notes, and obviously my brain will spark with the scenes that happen. But I can't say that this is an in-your-face episode. It's definitely one of those episodes where if you blink, you're basically going to miss something.
Yeah, it's
but
not
it sets up
necessarily
a
the
lot
most
of cool things.
Important episode is the thing. You're 100% right, but it does.
The Freys and the Blackfish are what I remember the most.
Yes.
Like setting up that kind of
which is crazy because again, they literally only set it up in this episode. That's it. Like we got a brief check-in with the Freys in order to set it up completely, and it's so interesting kind of where that arc goes. I'll get into that once we actually cover it on the episode. But yeah, it's so fascinating to me where this is an episode that I had kind of no expectations for going in. Like I said, what was so fascinating about this season is that it's one of those things where they spend the first half of the season setting everything up for the last 2 so hard, and then the next 3 episodes kind of just dive into subplot territory. You know, they wrap up Arya's arc. They reintroduce the Freys and the Blackfish, with the whole Riverlands arc and all kind of those hanging leftovers from season 6. You get, like I said, you spend a majority of this episode with Sam. You get the Hound back in the next episode. So it's like a lot of it is like weird subplots and like there's not as much stuff. So I find it really interesting. I don't know if that's really a matter of like kind of where they were at in the show's run and wanting to wrap up some of those ancillary subplots, or just a matter of they knew that they didn't want to keep jerking the audience around and spinning their wheels with, more useless BS in order to fill up the stuff. So they realized that they didn't need to include every important storyline in this season. Because fun fact, so this episode starts off with a brief check-in with Bran, right after the attack on the weird tree after last week's episode.
Yeah, he's still living in the past, so to speak.
Yeah,
he's
Meera's just dragging his ass around on the cart, just being like, oh my God, I don't even know how they're still alive at that point. I'm like, wow, Horror must have really held that door really, really well, because those White Walkers are still far behind him. I mean, it's always confusing with the way that they're cutting and the way
those zombies definitely peeled off their pound of flesh from Hodor as he held the door. But
I'm wondering if Hodor's corpse ended up making it to Winterfell in the finale. That's just one of those things that like my brain goes to as far as like different like.
That would have been the weirdest cameo shot ever in a long night. But I don't think they chose that for a reason.
to say
or
the least.
they decided to leave maybe
They're
that
like, look,
shot
we already
on
tortured
the
this
editing
guy
room
enough.
floor.
We already tortured this guy enough by literally having the majority of his role be to drag around this kid on a cart and say one word the entire time. They literally made him the Groot of the show, and they finally gave him like a pretty like awesome death. They're like, yeah, we're not going to torture him and bringing him back anymore.
Yeah, so listen, we pretty much the show has to leave Bran where he left off, and obviously he was stuck in sort of the past and trying to figure out, who he is. He's the new three-eyed raven, so there's a lot to learn in that role, and he's going to have to learn it on the fly because, obviously his training, his Jedi training or whatever you want to call it, was cut short, literally, by the Night King. So the main thing I would say is that, they're struggling. The zombies are right there on their tail. And all of a sudden, this stranger on a horse with an awesome, like, what is it? Ball and chain?
Yeah, like a ball and chain, like a mace almost, but like that can light on fire from the inside. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and if this was not done by HBO and was done by Marvel, it would have been like flame on, like it was basically he was able to flick a button and turn the flame on, a little bizarre, but hey, he was able to do it. So the stranger saves them and like, who are you? And all this stuff. And
typical reveal.
Yeah, it turns out to be Benjen.
Long lost Benjen Stark. Yeah, all the way back to season 1.
We saw him in season 1?
So we saw him in season. Remember, he's the one who brings Jon to the wall, and then he tells Jon about his ranging expedition that he's going north, and Jon wants to go with him, and he's like, "No, you can't go with me." Next thing you know, they report that he's missing. So it's so interesting because this is one of the few instances in this season, in the second half of the show, where this is what I like to call some of those loose overhanging threads. Because, like I said, what was so fascinating about season 6 going in is the fact that season 6 we'd pretty much wrapped up a majority of the main storylines of the show, but there were still a couple of loose overhanging storylines that they still had like kind of yet to bring in, and they realized that they probably could bring in. Case in point, the Ironborn, the wrapping up of the Riverlands arc, and Benjen is the next one. But famously, they changed around a decent amount, and it messes a little bit with the chronology because I have this one idea of chronology in my head, and Benioff and Wights do the best that they can with it. I think they do a much better job this season than they did the last season of how they handle it, but there's still something that feels a little off, where in the books, I was not expected to do this at all this season, but in the books, the whole thing is that, and famously, the reason why Jojen Reed, who died all the way back in season 4, is still alive in the books is because in the books, they are waylaid upon by a crew of White Walkers, almost killed, and they are rescued by this guy before they've even gotten to the tree yet. And he introduces himself as Cold Hands, and the implication is that he's Benjen Stark, zombified, brought back, almost killed by the White Walker, brought back by the Children of the Forest as this weird guardian figure in order to kind of help and assist them. But they never actually explicitly say that he is Benjen. So he kind of remains this like kind of mysterious character that's kind of just hanging around the tree helping to guard it, And I will say that this is one of those instances where it literally just presents itself as what it is, which is, okay, this is just that one loose kind of leftover hanging thread that we had since season 1. We're going to bring it back. And it's one thing because the problem is that, Benjen Stark was never that big of a character to begin with. He was always kind of a plot device character, but I don't know. It kind of robs him of having like this really cool badass moment. And it's just like, oh, so I'm pretty much here to just like, be your guardian and bring you to the wall. And
yeah, dude, it was really quick. They solved this. They're like, how is it possible? Yeah, Children of the Forest. They made me just like made the White Walkers. It was like really quick. Like they breezed through this dialogue scene, and it's like, oh, they made you with the dragon glass, and it was very interesting because obviously Benjen coming back, he's I guess he's a new type of dead, so to speak,
or undead in this case.
Yeah, and someone that has his wits about him, he knows that he needs to fight on the side of Bran.
He's still got his humanity.
Yeah, exactly, and we don't really explore that in the show. Like, I don't remember how many more episodes he's in.
Well, it's funny because that's exactly what happens is he's literally a plot device. These are the only two things left that Benjen Stark does in this show. He brings Bran to the wall. We have a brief check-in with Bran in the finale when Bran uncovers the whole R+L=J thing. And then he comes in season 7 to magically rescue Jon from the army of the dead when they're being swarmed upon by the lake after Daenerys has rescued them by the dragon, and sends Jon running away while he fends off the dead by himself and is like taken down and eaten.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet, in the rewatch. So
yeah, season 7's gonna be interesting to cover. I'm gonna be really interested, like what parts of that season are gonna age well for me, and what parts are not gonna age well. Because famously, I'm low-key a big fan of season 7, but in kind of like a guilty pleasure way. Like, I understand that it's not good, but I just had so much fun watching season 7 that I don't
I
know.
think season 7 is, it's shorter, it's easier to binge, so I think there is a definitely a guilty pleasure aspect to it. Now, my question is, they brought back the same actor, to play
Yeah,
Benjen,
Joseph
right?
Paul, famously. Yeah, that's the
Yeah, so
same guy. Season 1.
that's crazy. Season 1 to season 6, like,
Yeah.
they recasted
Four or
people for
5 years
less.
he hasn't been on the show. Like, and it still amazes me that they brought all these guys back. Some of whom, again, have not been on the show in years. Joseph Maul has not been on the show since season 1. Even though he's literally only been in like one episode each season previously, they brought David Bradley back. They brought the actor who played the Blackfish back. They brought all these actors back who haven't been on the show in like 2 or 3 years.
I don't know. They could have definitely recasted, and I know that I would have chose Johnny Depp, right?
You would have
come
chosen
back
Johnny Depp. Okay.
as Benjen start. Maybe
really
that's
timely,
a little.
aren't we?
Yeah, or how about this? Mike Myers, a little Austin Powers action as Benjen.
Now we're getting too far to the realm of possibility.
No, we can't recast this role.
Forget recasting the role. Just no Mike Myers. Just no Mike Myers in this role, please.
Yeah, but he could have done up the zombie makeup.
No. Just no Mike Myers. I instantly would have taken me out of it. So that's one. So yeah. So we got three pretty big substantial arcs this episode before we kind of hit the moment with Daenerys. I'll save the moment for Daenerys at the end, because like I said, this is kind of like the other thing that's so interesting about this episode is it's kind of like a more traditionally structured episode in the sense of where like we spend a lot of time in each of these 3 places and we cover a lot of ground with them. So do you want to hit Hornhill, King's Landing, or Bravos first?
Let's just do King's Landing, man.
We'll do King's Landing.
Let's just get straight to it.
Like I said, so this is the big moment. We famously didn't hit it last episode, and this is the big moment. The Tyrell army has arrived. Everyone's getting ready to make their moves. The armies are getting ready to move on the Sparrows, but the what's it called, the High Sparrow is playing his trickery, continuing to. And I mean,
dude, my favorite part about this scene is it starts with like Jaime Lannister riding on the horse. He's looking down the street, and here comes the Tyrell army, and he's just like looking up at the High Sparrow, like, you're gonna get it now.
No, not even that. That wasn't even the best part. When he was looking at Mace Tyrell, the way that he's riding, like this dude who could like barely sit his horse, but he's still got this stance like a warrior. But he's got this giant, ridiculous looking feather coming out of his helmet, and he's just looking at him like, I gotta work with this guy. That shit killed me.
Yeah, the whole thing is funny because Jaime goes up the stairs and he's talking with the High Sparrow, and he's like, yeah, you're gonna get it, every single one. He's like taunting him, and he's not even part of the plan,
right?
Like, it's going to be the Tyrell army going in there and securing Marjorie and saving the day. And it's funny that here's Jaime basically saying, hey, in the name of King Tommen, blah, 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 blah. And he's, basically a sort of male peacock just showing his feathers right there and saying that we won. And then obviously that's not what they get. The High Sparrow has sort of, manufactured this moment where Marjorie is not going to walk a walk of shame, but instead has converted someone, which apparently I would love to have been like the rules, like Cersei could have been told this, like, hey, convert someone or walk naked through the streets. But no, Marjorie's told this instead. So it's one of those weird things about the storyline that's, it would have been great if the High Sparrow kind of said, hey, Cersei, convert your whole family, and we'll let you go. And she refuses and does the walk instead. That would set up this whole idea of Marjorie convincing Tommen to be cool. But regardless, Olenna basically says, hey, this is us losing.
She says it outright,
Yeah, she knows what she's reading the tea leaves way before any of the others.
Right.
I guess Jaime's kind of up on it.
I mean, it becomes pretty obvious once Tommen comes out of the sept. You could just see the look on Jaime's face. But like, I'll say this about the sequence. I'll say that it's one of those things where, in hindsight, I don't necessarily know how well this sequence holds up. But I'll say this: I think it's a good payoff to how it's been set up. I think it's been very, very subtly set up as far as the High Sparrow playing his games with both Marjorie and Tommen, kind of engineering this moment, how he kind of played them and manipulated them into bringing the armies into the city in order to have this gigantic, big show in order to show this, like, okay, we have the power now, where he he brings out this entire army just with a few choice words and all. I think that part was all well and good. The moment itself, I thought was really tense, how they kind of have this giant build up to you think what's going to be like this moment of like crazy bloodshed, and then it turns out, no, it's not, it's all kind of for naught. I think it is really interesting, kind of the sequence and how it builds up. What I'm still kind of 50-50 on is the stuff that comes after it, where Tommen is kind of now completely being manipulated by the High Sparrow and all that. Jaime is trying to get him to see sense, and he's just not seeing it. Jaime is kind of banned from the Kingsguard and is now being sent to deal with the Blackfish situation.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, the funniest part about this is Jaime goes up there and says, I'm doing this in the name of the king. And then obviously Tommen comes out and says, I'm part of the High Sparrow's gang.
Right.
And then they cut to the Iron Throne, and they're sentencing Jaime for his punishment for defying the king.
Right.
And it's like, listen, dude, like you could have literally held a little bit of a meeting prior to this and said, hey, Uncle Jaime, you better not be there today or else, and then show him defying you. Like, I don't think, obviously if you're the king, you're the king. You get to make
we
whatever
also know it's
decision you want.
Tommen, and Tommen clearly hasn't thought this far ahead, so.
Yeah, but even whatchamacallit, the uncle, right?
Kevin,
Tywin's brother. He's just sitting there like, yeah, you defied the king. Like, wouldn't he?
Kevin Lannister lost a lot of brownie points with me between this season and last season. Between last season, just like going against Cersei for literally no reason, and then literally just swooping in and taking control when she is at her weakest, and then this season just openly defying them until he has no choice, and then kind of just blindly going along. Like, I'm sorry, Kevin Lannister deserved to die in that set.
But he doesn't necessarily respect Jaime enough to save him from this miscommunication, because clearly Jaime was just there taunting, and so he was just on the scene. He wasn't really, I guess circumstantially he wasn't taking part in it, but and also what did he do? He thought he was doing what Tommen wanted, and clearly that was whatever. So it just tells you how weak Tommen is, because people are trying to do something on his behalf, and then obviously he's decided to do something else, and he doesn't know who to trust or who to talk to or anything. He doesn't really know how to be a king, and that's what's going to be interesting going forward. Is like, oh man, like way back in what was it, season 4, when Tywin's trying to manipulate Tommen, it's like, that's all his reign's going to be is just people trying to manipulate him.
Who is going to be manipulating him in the moment? Tywin for season 4, Cersei for season 5, and the High Sparrow for the rest of season 6 until his ultimate demise, unfortunately,
Yeah, until
just counting down. We're just counting down the days until the Winds of Winter. Just think about that as far as that goes. Then you can finally say goodbye to your favorite character ever, Tommen Baratheon of,
hey, listen, like, I think his downfall was the fact that on his wedding night he was trying to break some kind of record, because once Marjorie's gone, it's like he's in this desperate thing where he's not going to have any other relationship. He's not going to have he has full power still.
Yeah.
He's still the king, but like, it's clearly that he's love struck by Marjorie, and that's really what's leading this, is just his obsession with her.
Right.
And so, so to speak, and that just leads to his tragic ending. Yep. Like if he was a little bit older,
literally was a follower up until he followed them right off the cliff to his death.
Exactly. But, if he was a little bit older, a little more understanding of the world, he would probably be, melancholia, just like sort of like moving the spoon around in the soup. But more or less, he would probably mope around for a few years and then figure it out. Instead, he just like is too young, thinks it's over, and just, does his thing at the end of the season.
The only other thing that I could really say about this sequence is that I'll say that Cersei's kind of plan for the first time in a couple seasons actually does make sense, because she knows that, because it's one of those things where she's starting to conceive of this plan, and she understands now that she's like, look, Jaime, you tried it. We tried it your way. We tried to team up with everyone else. That didn't work. Now we got to take revenge and we just got to kill everybody all at once. And she knows that. And so she's starting to come up with this plan, but she also knows that Jaime is not going to be that well equipped for it. So the idea of kind of having Jaime presented as like this strong front for the Lannister army in this campaign that's going to take place eventually, with the Freys and everything that's going to take place over the next 2 episodes, I think is surprisingly ingenious as she as she kind of continues to concoct her plan in King's Landing, which of course brings us to, like I said, we got the Freys back. We have one very hilarious scene with Walder Frey just complaining once again. I will say that nobody tells exposition better than David Bradley as Walder Frey, where he's kind of catching us up on all the shit that's happened over the course of the 2 seasons, where it's like, oh, the Blackfish did escape the Red Wedding. It's like, oh, wow, thanks for telling us now, 3 seasons later after it happened, considering that he literally was the only one that seemingly didn't die. Kind of recaps us as far as the Red Wedding, like we didn't remember it, that it happened 3 weeks, 3 seasons ago, before they bring in Edmure Tully.
It's definitely a masterclass in a scene that shouldn't happen, but it kind of is necessary, right? Because it brings us back into the storyline. It kind of puts us in a different direction. It really helps set up what Jaime's going to be doing, as well as obviously the Blackfish is supposed to be a very important ally for Sansa and Jon. And so here it is, it's basically going to serve to put a little bit of a stranglehold on Jon and Sansa, leading into the Battle of the Bastard. It's like, they really didn't get the Blackfish. They really don't have that many houses that, support them. So, it's one of those things where this is a necessary scene, basically to counteract what's happening in the North with Jon and Sansa.
Absolutely, yeah. So with that being said, let's move on. Let's hit Hornhill next, because, again, this is a sequence where it's, again, not necessarily, but you know what it is about this sequence that I love so much? It kind of reminds me of the Game of Thrones of old, where we would get those kind of random, seemingly one-off episodes, usually in the second half of the season, that weren't necessarily super plot-based, but they were more so character-based. I can think of, A Man Without Honor in season 2, Mockingbird in season 7, episodes that would, have these, micro bits of plot in them, but were surprisingly centered on, some pretty big character development. This is it for Sam, because for, again, a subplot where Sam is literally just on a journey south to the Citadel, I think they do some pretty damn good work here as far as, introducing us to Sam's personal life. This is the first time we're meeting Sam's family, kind of Sam and Gilly having to present this kind of unified formalist front. It's seeing Sam for the first time, kind of conduct himself in a setting that's not the Night's Watch. It's very fascinating as far as that goes. And I think it plays out pitch perfectly from beginning to end,
100%. So they arrive at home, and Sam's mother and sister welcome them, and here's Gilly, and it's like, hey, they don't even know if they're not married, they don't bring up their status of the relationship. They just say, hey, here's baby Sam, and assumptions are made, and they accept them right away. It's pretty much like you're part of the family, and it's like they even say Gilly, I know you've been traveling, but you gotta take a shower and get on one of these dresses. I'll give you one of mine. So Gilly and the sister are immediately becoming friends, from the get-go. Just the Xenia, so to speak, right? To bring up Greek mythology and the welcoming people into the home and treating them with respect. That's what we see here from the mother and the daughter. And then, we eventually get to dinner.
Yes, and we get to dinner. And boys dinner. Well, first off, this is where we're introduced to Sam's father and brother, Randall and Dickon Tarly, who unfortunately meet their tragic ends at the hands of Daenerys next season. Randall played by, old school British stage actor James Faulkner, who's great in everything that he's in. He popped up in a couple of nerd properties. And strangely enough, again, it's one of those strange things where it's like, oh, wow, this guy certainly was in a lot of stuff. I think this is famously the last part, the last major character in the show who gets recast, because Sam's brother, Dickon Tarly, is portrayed by Tom Hopper of the Umbrella Academy, and who was just most recently in the new Resident Evil season for season 7. But in this one sequence where he appears in, he's actually portrayed by Harry Potter alumni Freddie Stroma, who actually would appear as Vigilante in James Gunn's Peacemaker that premiered earlier this season. And it's so baffling to me, once again, seeing just how kind of prissy and British he appears in most of the stuff that he's in. And then when he pops up in Peacemaker, he's gives one of the best performances I think I've ever seen in anything that is just kind of so overlooked, just kind of like how chameleonic and how like rubbery his face is. Like that guy really is like a sneakily good actor. I will say that. But this scene is just pitch perfect from start to finish. It summarizes Sam as a character completely, where he's just starting to get uncomfortable. He thinks he's finally achieved some sort of, status. He's achieved something in the world. He's been a member of the Night's Watch. He's survived all of these different hardships. He's on his way south to the Citadel to become a maester, which is a position of great prominence. And all his dad can see in him is the same, in his eyes, useless, fat kid that is more, into books than hunting and killing that he sent away in the first place, And I think it's really awesome kind of seeing the context because it shows that Sam is still too scared to face up to his dad. I remember that this scene like hit me particularly hard when I watched it the first time. And it's one of those scenes that still hits me every time. And it almost shot and it still baffles me that it's in this sector of the show, considering the fact that we don't really get moments like these in this half of the show. But it's absolutely incredible to me because, of course, Gilly's going to step to his defense because she's like, who is this piece of shit talking to my mans like this? And it leads to, again, I think
it's to me, it's a weird scene in the sense that, you sent your son away. You said, I will kill you or you go join the Night's Watch. You're useless. Mm-hmm. And he comes back home and he's legitimately going to be trained to be like the second in command at Castle Black. And you still don't think that he's worth anything. That is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Right. It's like
nuts.
Okay. Yes.
It's one of those things where I'm like, look, why like what? So you're just like, you're never going to like be proud of your son for anything,
the main thing is, okay, sure, he's not going to be a warrior, and he's not going to necessarily, run into battle and kill 30 people, and go and drink ale, and go to the bordello and do all that stuff, right? He's not going to do that definition of what seemingly his father thinks is a man, and he instead is going to become a predominant figure in the leadership of the Night's Watch. To me, that's the weird thing is like, this, his father, is a warrior. Yes. But he's also, a leader. He's the head of his family. So the fact is, the fact that he has no respect for the fact that Sam is stepping up into a leadership position is crazy to me. It just shows you how much disdain that he has for his son that's beyond, potentially logical reasoning. And that to me is what makes the situation between the two of them, very like crazy.
100%. And the one thing that I'll say about that too as well, and kind of like why I can get on board with this, because I know that shit happens in like real life. That shit happens where it's like, fathers with their sons, they can only see them in like one particular way, and no matter how hard they try, if it's like the son just for whatever reason just cannot line up with the father's vision of what they wanted for him. And I think it's also a big thing too, where everything seemingly that that Randall Tarly wanted in his son, he got in his second son, Dickon Tarly, but it's like he always wanted that for his older brother, Sam, and it probably drove a wedge between the two brothers growing up as well, where the two brothers probably tried to get along, but were on such different walks of life that they probably never had any interaction, which is why Sam probably had like only some interaction with his sister growing up. Like I said, it's an amazingly well done scene.
The funny thing at this is that the Sam and the brother are like chatting, like
they're getting along.
This is last week's hunt. We still haven't caught this week's. We're going around the perimeter.
Again, because Sam's in a much different place than he was, when he probably first left Hornhill. When he first left Hornhill, he probably had no idea even knew how to have a discussion with his brother, and now he's like, it's like to some extent, yes, he's still obviously scared, terrified of his father, but like I said, like Gilly said, he killed a White Walker. He killed a Thenn. Like, he's faced down things that very, very few men in their entire lifetimes ever will, And I think that...
Yeah. And I think that's a nice, subtle thing is, like, when Gilly says, oh, he killed a Night Walker, they're like, oh, there's no such thing, Like,
I love how Gilly says those things. Basically says, yes, your son is this killer that you want him to be. And the only thing that Tarly can say is north of the wall. That's the only thing he can focus
exactly.
on. But I understand that because I'm like, that is the same shit that like somebody like my dad would do, where I tell him all these different things that happen, and he'll only focus on that one detail that he didn't like.
Well, the one thing I'm just curious, how far south is Hornhill? Like,
Pretty
where
far
exactly?
south. It's so basically like if you think of Westeros like North and South America, right? Like kind of the way. Basically, think of the
Yeah.
entirety of North America as being the North. You know, think of like the borderline between U.S. and Canada is where the wall is, and Canada and everything north of that is north of the wall. Then you get like to around like Mexico area. That would be probably around like where the neck is, and then once you get south of there, so basically. Again, thinking of this geographically, so you got the
Well,
Erie.
the twins would be Panama, but
Well, so,
like,
no, not even. So Erie would be.
what do
To
you
the
mean? That's
east.
the smallest point, right? You got the Erie Canal, or that not the Panama Canal. Jeez.
Panama Canal. No, that wouldn't be the Twins because the Twins is further down south. Because so basically on the western side of the continent, you have the Riverlands stretching down. Then you have the Westerlands, which are where the Lannisters reside. All that. Then the islands off to the side there. There would be a series of islands there. That would be the Iron Islands. Then on the eastern side of the continent, you got the Vale of the Arryn up in the top north corner. Then you have the Stormlands coming down south. King's Landing is kind of cushioned in between the two. And then in the dead center of the continent is the is the Reach, which is Highgarden. That's the Tyrells, and Hornhill is somewhere in there because the Hornhill and the Tarleys, I believe, are the second richest family in that region after the Tyrells.
Gotcha. So the main thing is,
and then Dorne and the Martells are all the way down south at the very bottom of the continent. There's like an extra like shelf that stretches out.
yeah, the main thing is for sure that they are down there. They're not in the north. They're not bordering the wall. Right. So again, it's one of those things where this irrational hatred for the wildlings. Like, did a wildling just like migrate so far south?
Yeah, it's one of those things, just built-in prejudice. Like I said, obviously the Northerners of Orwell was going to have a different relationship with the wildlings than the Southerners do because the Northerners like have active conflict with the wildlings. But like, who knows when the hell?
Yeah, but the North would have conflicts with them. So what? The North.
Just built
the Northmen take a vacation in Hornhill and they're drinking at a bar and they're just those wildlings.
It's probably just built-in prejudice because, like I said, the majority of the Southerners are descended from the Andals, which are the second race of men that came to Westeros in between the first men of the Targaryens. And like I said, the first men, the majority of the Northerners and the wildlings are all descended from the first men, which is why the Northerners usually have some kinship with the wildlings, at least the ones that are descended from the Northmen. But almost all the majority of the Southerners are descended from the Andals, which are the second, with the exception of the Dornish, which were the second race of men that came over. So not only did they not have any sort of common lineage with the wildlings, it's just built-in prejudice. Just after hearing
the main thing is, well, he would have to read a book from a maester or something. But anyway, the fact is, he doesn't believe in reading books apparently, according to this scene. Right. I think the thing is, like, this scene would have been a little bit better if he was skeptical about Gilly from the start of the dinner. Right. Like, oh, you're just some northerner that my son's hooked up with you and blah, 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 blah. Because then it would make sense that, oh, she's a wildling. She's even further north. I've heard stories, like this is crazy. Like, right. Then he could be super offended. Otherwise, like, I don't know. He just hates the wildlings because it's part of the tension between Sam and his father. So I think that's kind of a little bit weird. I would like to have seen, a little more skepticism about who Gilly is to begin with.
I mean, it was surprising if it was already there. That's just part of like keeping him silent for a majority of the scene. But it's one of those things where you can tell he's never got his eye off of them.
I'm picking at some of the details, and it just seems like it could have been a little more detail oriented in how he really acts, because he just explodes like, oh, how dare you bring a wildling into my house. And I'm just wondering why, out of all the things in the world, that's the biggest thing that you hate. Right. Is there a backstory, like he went and visited the Starks when he was younger, and like his brother got killed by a wildling on some sort of raid, right?
His wife did say that they met with the Umbers at one point. So
I'm just I think it would be cool if there was a little more inherent backstory into his hatred, instead of just him hating. I guess it's possible. I guess we don't get to see that backstory, but in terms of like a story to really just amp it up a little bit, give more depth to a character, it would have been nice to have that. Other than he's a hard man. And that's all the characterization we really get from Sam's father. And it's enough because Sam doesn't want to leave Gilly with that, type of person. Basically wants to hurt his father, so he takes the Valyrian sword. And he also thinks it's going to be helpful in the long run when he reunites with Jon. And so he takes that sword and he leaves Hornhill in the middle of the night.
Indeed. Yeah, it's kind of sporadic. It kind of comes out of nowhere. It's kind of like his one last act of rebellion. And I'm like, okay, you go, Sam. The fact that he takes the Valyrian steel sword, understandably so, it's probably pretty smart considering that, his father and brother both die in the next season.
Yeah.
So
it's probably his first act of rebellion, right? Because his father threatened to kill him unless he joined the Night's Watch, and he went along with that plan the whole time. Yeah. So this is the first time that he's actually proving himself, to be a man in the sense of his father's eyes by, doing this act of rebellion, doing what is necessary, and really not being concerned about, the anger of his father. So I think the character of who Sam was and who he is now, this scene kind of comes full circle and really shows us the growth. Before he was shut down, really just afraid, probably would have died in season 1 had it not been for Jon and his advice and his friendship over the years. And the fact is, like, Sam now has a backbone. He's willing to do like the unthinkable. Gilly's there the whole time and she's like, oh, won't he, come for it? And Sam just responds, I'd like to see him try, or something similar to that effect.
And then it turns out he apparently doesn't care about that sword as much as he thought, because he never sends any raiding parties for it, never suspects where it is,
Yeah, well, maybe he just never really looked at the mantle again.
Who
Maybe he was so angry that a wildling was in that dining room that he never ate there again.
Maybe. Who knows? That would be something crazy. But anyway, let's cut to Bravos. And I'm not going to lie. Right now, this is Apex Arya for me. Like, Arya. So I was talking about how Jon coming back to life and carrying out his last act as Lord Commander was kind of Apex Jon, right? We're not quite to the point of Apex Bran yet, but we're getting there. If not having already passed. And this is Apex Arya for me. Like, Sansa to me is the only character of the last 4 remaining alive Starks after this season that is kind of still compelling in any way, shape, or form. Because Arya to me, this is the last time that she's even remotely humane. It's kind of the final time of her like reaffirming her humanity and reaffirming her faith and her belief in others. And it's also like the last time that she's actually able to form a genuine human connection to someone. And it's awesome. Like, they kind of finish up the arc of the play in a strange way, kind of finish recapping like the events of the first 4 seasons. It's still awesome to see how Arya reacts to it differently than the last couple of seasons. And this is the moment she officially makes up her mind and says, fuck the Faceless Men. I'm not going to be some ruthless bounty hunter. I'm not going to be that person that just kills willy-nilly.
It's interesting because she's in the back and she's talking with the what is it, Lady Grey?
Lady Crane, yeah.
Crane. So the fact is, I've seen you watch this play. Did you pay? And it's like, nah, I didn't. Whatever.
Yeah.
And she's wondering why you're watching. She's suspicious. Why are you watching this play so many times? And they strike up a conversation. And I forget how it works out, but like there's a moment for Arya to really poison her rum, right?
Yeah.
And I guess she drops the vial.
No, she doesn't. That's not what happens at all. What happens?
So there's
Arya leaves. So Arya leaves the tent. Lady Crane is in the conversation with the other actors. Richard E. Grant starts giving her like a little bit of, starts giving her an earful because she's suggesting that she could add a little bit more dimension to the character, And, Richard E. Grant starts giving her an earful saying, oh, I'm the only one whose opinion really matters. You don't get an opinion. You don't get a voice. Again, kind of a little bit of one of those like really weird, like, okay, authors trying to insert their gripes of not being taken seriously as true artists into the media that they're making. And she's about to drink the rum when Arya comes in, knocks it out of her hands, and straight up points at the girl who hired the Faceless Men who wants to take her spot. And is like, careful of that one. She wants to see you dead, before just straight up leaving. And the waif has apparently been there the entire time, keeping an eye on her. The waif guy, and then, like I said, this is what just solidifies it. I'm like, yeah, the waif is the worst character ever, where she just goes into Jaqen and is like, she didn't do it. And Jaqen is like, oh, don't make her suffer. And she's like, she nods. And I'm like, what part of you believes that this character is going to not let her suffer in any way, shape, or form? And Arya goes, she recovers Needle from the hiding spot where she left it in season, at the beginning of season 5.
Yeah, I just thought it was awkward. I must have blinked at the slapping of the rum. But the fact that
I mean,
everyone's
it's an awkward cut for sure. It kind of comes out of nowhere.
everyone is just like looking at her, and I'm just thinking like, Arya just tried to kill her, and like I think they all know that that's the case.
Yeah,
like that's what, or at least that's what they're thinking.
It's like way to out yourself right there,
Yeah, exactly. And then she just goes like a boss. She's like, "Be careful of that one. She wants you dead." And it's
pretty
like,
awesome.
I'm pretty sure that you, the person that just slapped the rum out of my hand, is the one that wants me dead. Like, it's obviously we follow Arya. We get the shot of the waif who's obviously following her. But I'm just curious what, Lady Crane and the rest of the actors think. It's like, and I don't think it's the young actress that played Lady Sansa is the killer. I think it's like, it's like, is Ashton Kutcher going to come out of the curtain and say we're punked? Like I think they're thinking something totally different. And I don't know if that warning, and I guess we'll never really find out because the characters kind of end at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they would actually believe some random, girl that shows up and slaps rum out of your hand.
Yeah.
Hey, you never know.
Look, we got the very sloppy resolution of this arc over the next 2 episodes. That is like, forget Game of Thrones. It kind of brings it back. It's kind of reminiscent of like, again, this it's Dorne from season 5. It's Meereen from this season. It's Yara's attack on the Dreadfort in season 4. It's one of those just so ridiculously stupid moments that is so out of place that it's like, why is this even here between the next 2 episodes where Arya is flaunting herself around, just throwing around bags of gold to pay people to take her back to Westeros, and then get stabbed, rightfully so, by the waif. And then in the following episode is, the waif kills Lady Crane in order to try and get to her while she's being, nursed back to health. And and Arya takes her on this parkour sequence. The less said about that, the better. We'll cover that in the next 2 episodes.
When we get to the parkour sequence, we'll have a lot of things to say about it.
The next 2 episodes is where kind of Bravos just loses me completely. But like I said, this is the last point where Bravos is like remotely interesting. So let's bring it to the last sequence where, man, Daenerys. I mean, I'm so happy that we didn't have to suffer. It elated me to no end that we did not have to suffer through Meereen in this episode. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we don't get any of Meereen either in the next episode, which I'm like, thank fucking God. But so you got this last kind of tied up sequence here with Daenerys leading the Dothraki, where she kind of just leaves them standing in that valley for God only knows how long. They don't really say how long they're waiting for. The Dothraki are just like kind of sitting there, just being like, okay, did we just get let out of Vice Dothraki for no reason? And it's so confusing because this sequence is so simultaneously awesome, but so unnecessary and repetitive. If it's like, okay, we need to, it felt like, okay, we needed to put a scene with Daenerys in here where it's like, okay, she comes in on them with the dragon and asks them to like come with her to conquer the world and all that. And it's like, okay, so she's officially decided to leave Meereen. So this is like her official like decision making. She's made the decision to finally leave Meereen and go back to Westeros, with Daario kind of telling her that she's a conqueror. And the first thing that she does is just, convince the Dothraki to come with her. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they were already willing to do anything that she wanted to do after, she literally murdered all the cows and then emerged from the fire again. But I don't know. What's your take on this sequence?
No, 100%. It was definitely like a rehash of the main house there being burned down and her emerging and everybody kneeling. This was the round 2 of that. So I guess they're all riding that high of like, yeah, we're committed to her. And then when they see the dragon, it's just, they're really amped. I don't know if it really adds anything to it. I think it's that really subtle hint of like, when we get back to Meereen, we're packing our bags. We're going on our real mission. Finally, like we got the Dothraki, we got the Unsullied. We just got to figure out the ship situation, which is another call out to basically, the Iron Isles, right? Because there's 2 groups of Iron Isles that are going to have ships. The ones that have the small lot of ships now that are sailing on the sea, and the ones that are chopping down the trees and spinning the silk to make the new ships that are going to rule the world, so to speak. And, so I guess it's setting up a storyline to happen in the future episodes. So there is a little subtlety in this sequence, but, at the end of the day, it's sort of just a quick, hey, Daenerys is in this episode, then we out, it's,
quick.
It's not much happens. It's a
fun.
Nice fiery speech.
Yeah.
We
get the dragon back. It's awesome.
Yeah. Dothraki meet dragon. I guess they dropped the whole idea that the dragon's going to misbehave. It just all of a
That's
sudden,
just done with. They're just immediately past our adolescent phase.
the dragon's like, oh, you got some Dothraki? I'm down. You know, I don't know.
I'm totally not going to roast any of these guys.
Exactly. So I don't know why that's the case. You know, maybe the dragon kind of likes horse riders. I don't get it.
I think this is definitely the moment where kind of like the obsession with the dragons started to begin, because like you get the dragons, obviously they're on full force in Battle of the Bastards, and then at the end of episode 10, and then you get them like they're damn near every episode for the next 2 seasons. You know, they're really trying to show up. They're like, yeah, these dragons are pretty much all we got left, so we got to make damn good use of them.
You know, maybe it's because she hadn't set a house on fire and
who knows?
Emerged from it in way too long, that the dragons just really didn't believe she was their mother. And now that she's done that in a big fashion, the dragons are like, yeah, I remember you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So she just has to set a house on fire every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty much it. That's our recap and review of season 6, episode 6, Blood of My Blood. Like I said, subplots of the episode. We got about 2 more episodes of subplots.
Yeah,
to
the
cover before we
subplots of my
cover that.
subplots, man.
Subplots upon subplots upon subplots. So many subplots for these next two episodes. But like I said, it is all worth it for once we get to the 1-2 punch of Battle of the Bastards and Winds of Winter. Pat, thank you so much for co-hosting with me once again. This is a little bit of a shorter episode, but like I said, it was subplots upon subplots. So where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Hey, listen, you can find me at Patrick W. Huber on Instagram. I'm posting there every once in a while. You can see sort of, some of the production stuff I do, some of the photos I take, just random stuff that I'm putting out there on the social media.
Awesome. Please be sure to go follow him with everything. Follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews. Be sure to follow Chris at Christian Ivankov. Follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Twitch. And be sure to keep tuned for brand new episodes of Talkin Thrones and the Talkin TV podcast uploaded on Mondays and Fridays every single week throughout the year on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's it. Take care. We'll see you guys next week. And as always, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.